Okay. Chapter 5, a couple of introductory terms and ideas that I think will be helpful for us to keep in mind. Whenever we hear the word that is translated, and it's the actual translation, as being higher, I think the word that might work better is the word more personal. Because, again, maybe it's me, but I think in English, when we describe something as being higher, we tend to mean that it's better. And it's not a better, worse kind of thing. It's about the personal impact of it, more deeply personal. Um, Another term that we're going to be talking about is the idea of learning Torah in addition to the mitzvah of learning Torah. Now, we've come across this already. We talk about that all mitzvahs are driven by love. That is what prompts me to do the mitzvahs, the action mitzvahs, the ases, the thou shalts, because I want to be close with Hashem. And the concept, the driving force of yira, reverence, which prompt me to not violate the thou shalt nots, the los ases, because I don't want to be detached from Hashem. But then we ask, aren't love and fear mitzvahs themselves? There's a mitzvah. We say it in the Shema. You should love the Lord your God. That is a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah. Es Hashem Elokecha tira. God should be revered or feared. So what do we mean by the concept of love and fear in contrast to or in addition to the mitzvahs of love and fear? And so we explain that the mitzvahs of love and fear, like every mitzvah, they got rules and parameters and so on. When we talk about the concepts of love and fear, we're not talking about the action items as much as we are about the driving force. Well, to use that analogously, in this chapter, we're going to be talking about the concept of learning Torah in addition to, but separate from, the mitzvah of learning Torah. And you probably recognize this phrase. We talk about Torah and mitzvahs. Well, why do we call it Torah and mitzvahs when Torah is one of the mitzvahs? Well, there's two aspects to it. Yes, there is the mitzvah of Torah study, and like every mitzvah, like Kashrus and Shabbos and so forth, there's many rules and laws and requirements, etc. And then there is the conceptual idea of learning Torah. To use as maybe somewhat of a loose analogy, in the Lubavitch yeshiva system, at least the way it's sort of written up, there is no such thing as vacation. Even Pesach and Sukkot, the yeshiva is open. What then do we mean by the term commonly used, bein hazmanim, between the different times? So the Rebbe explained that during the day, the classroom time, you have to study according to the curriculum. And during the bein hazmanim, whether that means what we commonly refer to as the break during the day or the break in the Yontif or summertime, then you get to learn whatever you want. But there's no such thing that you're not learning Torah. So there is the mitzvah of learning Torah, that is, whatever time the class begins. And then there is the conceptual idea of learning Torah, which is illustrated when the person is not under the curriculum restraints, rather has the option to study Torah as is to their liking. And again, many different parameters and very uh, um, light shades that distinguish the two. But this is going to become important in this chapter, which is the analysis of why we put so much emphasis on Torah study. We know this from the practical mapping out of the day. We know this from the social, sort of cultural reverence that we ascribe to Torah study. Why is that so lofty? There's always that we serve Hashem. There's davening, there's mitzvah actions. Why do we put so much emphasis on Torah study? And within that, we have to further subdivide the term that we use as Torah study. There is Torah study that is a stage within the mitzvah fulfillment. In other words, I have to keep Shabbos, so I have to learn the laws of Shabbos. I have to eat matzah, so I have to learn the laws of matzah. So that is an instructional side of Torah study. And then there are the meaningful sides of Torah study for my spiritual awareness and so on. What we are going to be focusing on in this chapter is the objective of Torah study that is not linked to any particular outcome. It's not instructional. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not inspirational. It simply is the pursuit of Torah study, as we often refer to it with this phrase, which we're going to explore, called lishma. Now, lishma, if you just put it in the translation, it comes out as to its name. And it's not about, well, I need to figure out how to do something, or I want to create a certain character or culture. It is simply the desire to know Hashem. And how do we get to know Hashem? Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to begin this chapter referencing a quote that we talked about in the previous chapter. In the previous chapter, we talked about how the garments, which are the mode of expression that we have, which is we engage in our thought, our spoken word, and our deed, can match up with the garments, the mode of expression that Hashem has manifested. That is, since God is eager to be in a connected relationship with us, and the idea of God and infinite and so on is very awe-inspiring, but not very personally meaningful. So Hashem, in his desire to be aligned with us, encloses himself, that's the Levushim, in particular illustrations of instructional and conceptual ideas in Torah. And yet we say that when we are engaged in Torah or mitzvahs, which don't always feel very spiritually aligned or manifest in the oneness of God, they sometimes feel like very rudimentary tasks. We are in actual absolute oneness and alignment with the infinity of Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe used the analogy, it's like when you hug the king, you don't say, I hugged the robes. You say, I hug the king, even though he's enclosed in robes. And sometimes, if he didn't have the robes, I wouldn't know that he was the king. Because I can't recognize the king in the raw. I only recognize the king when he expresses himself in a manner that is identifiable to me, that I recognize that this is the expression of the king. So we have a word here, tfisa, which means to grasp, to hold it in my hand. And the Alter Rebbe is quoted, and we're going to talk about it again here, that no thought can grasp him. Now, whenever we make a statement negating a concept, the implication is that had we not made the statement, we might have mistakenly thought the opposite. So we make the statement, no thought can grasp him. The implication being that had we not made this clarification, we might have thought that a thought could grasp him. So we have to do a little reverse engineering and understand what would have legitimately, meaning we're not talking about a foolish mistake, we're talking about a misunderstanding. What could have reasonably led us to an understanding that God was graspable, that Eliyahu Hanavi has to inform us that no, he is not graspable. I mean, why would I have thought otherwise? So these are some of the issues that we are going to address here. And it's really an emphasis on the distinctive characteristic of Torah study. Not just that mitzvah is better than every other mitzvah, but the conceptual drive behind Torah study. So here we go. Perikei. Ulatoisvis beer. And you see again, it begins with the letter Vav, which is always an indicator that this is a continuation of the previous chapter. The previous chapter, we explored the accessibility to Hashem is only through Torah and mitzvahs. How do we align ourselves with Hashem? Only in the way that Hashem tells us we can. And this chapter describes this particular, again, higher, superior, I like the phrase more personal, if that helps it clarify it, of Torah study. And essentially what we're going to say is, when a person studies Torah, what is different about that than any mitzvah action is, A, it allows us to absorb something from outside of ourselves. The distinctive characteristic of a human being is our ability to get over ourselves. I like the term imagination, fill in a different term. It's the ability to literally get outside of ourselves. And it's a difficult thing. I mean, people tend to be completely contained within themselves. I like something, I assume other people like it. And then the capacity to be aware of something completely outside of my own personal experience is the distinctive quality of incorporating the infinite. In addition, unlike physical mitzvah actions, even though they also, of course, have a residue, and as the Mishnah says, one mitzvah will cause you to do another mitzvah, it is incomparable to the penetration into my very identity of study in contrast to practice and behavior. And again, if I was on an airplane and the pilot said, I just know which controls to push, but I don't have any understanding of why when you push this button that happens, I'm not as confident as when the guy says, I have a full and complete understanding. It is intuitively ingrained within my very existence. So the Alter Rebbe is going to use an analogy in contrast to the clothing which I put on, but I can take off. Torah study is more like food, which literally becomes absorbed into the very fabric of my identity. And Torah study similarly literally becomes absorbed into the very fabric of my identity. So the Alter Rebbe lays out for us that the goal here is l'tois v'sbir ber hetiv, to explain and to explain it very well. And we've already encountered this phrase, be'er hetiv, to explain it very well. It's not just means better, but it means well in the sense that it can become it can become pragmatically illustrated through our character. Remember, Tanya is not simply a study of certain concepts. Not that that's a bad thing. That's an important thing. You have an idea, you learn about it, you do some analysis, and now you understand this pasuk in Chumash, this mitzvah, this yantif. Those are important things. I'm not diminishing them. That's not the objective of Tanya. The objective of Tanya is to give us a whole philosophy for how we are going to be connected and aligned with the infinity of Hashem. So bear hativ, to explain it well, doesn't just mean I explained it better than I explained it before. It means that it should saturate our very identity and thus animate our behavior and our character in the pursuit of be righteous and not wicked, as we have talked about. So never lose sight of that mission. What are we going to explain? Lashon tfisa, this term tfisa. Now the word tfisa, it's actually Aramaic. The Hebrew form is tophes without that aleph suffix. It means to grasp. You hold on to a physical object, it's tophes. Now, when we use this in English as well, that has no standing and so on. But in Torah, we use this, in Hebrew, just in general, we use this to mean a degree of understanding or of awareness. Something has stature. It's tophes makom. It takes up some space. It has some stature. So Elijah writes, and we say it in the Friday before Shabbos davening, he says, "Les machshava tfisa bei." No thought can grasp him. And again, the fact that he negates the idea implies that had he not made this statement, we might have thought that a thought could grasp him, meaning he's coming to, as we would call it, bavarn, he's coming to anticipate a misunderstanding. So what does it mean to toifes, to grasp something? Why would we have been under the impression that we could grasp Hashem, and yet we are told that no thought can grasp Hashem? So what is this whole process? What does this mean? No thought can grasp Hashem. What does that even mean? That a thought would grasp Hashem. Why would I have made that mistake? And what is he coming to teach us? Sharm Eliyahu, les machshava tvisa b'chulu. As Eliyahu Hanavi says, no thought can grasp him. Now, again, this is what I'm about to say now is a non-literal aspect, and again, I know my tendency is to go down these long paths, so I hope it's okay. Why is Eliyahu Hanavi telling us this? We have a general rule of thumb that we don't presume that our sages were smarter than other sages. Why did this guy say, well, he was so smart, he thought of it, the other guys didn't think of it. That's not our general perspective. Our perspective is that there's something about their life experience that made this lesson most meaningful to them. So what is it about Eliyahu Hanavi that, again, might have led us to think that a thought could grasp him, and the bavarnish, the anticipation and negation of that presumption is articulated as no thought can grasp him. So again, this is totally speculative, but maybe it'll add a layer of understanding. We look at the name Eliyahu. Eliyahu is a combination of the two names of Hashem. Aleph and Lamed is Kale, like Elohim and Kale. You recognize that. Yud Hey Vav, which is the last three letters of his name, are the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Eliyahu, who, again, we know much about him, and he didn't die in the classic biological sense, and he returns for every bris, and he's the herald of Mashiach. He represents this sort of link of Kale, which is the godliness that creates the world. Bereshis bara Elokim, that's the Kale power, is the God that creates this physical world. And the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the godliness that is outside of this world. And again, we talk about this even personally. There's my public face and my private face. Now, in this secular usage of that, we tend to think that our private face is something that we're embarrassed about, so we put on a good show. But what we would explain in Hasidus is the public space has got to be attenuated to the crowd. And the private space is something far more personal and far more intense, which the world is not interested in my sharing, or they're not ready for me to share, or it's going to be burdensome for them, or a little overwhelming for them, or a little too much, and so on. So Eliyahu, the name, is representative of this combination of these two forces. And that's why Eliyahu would think, oh, I can connect, I can grasp Hashem, because I am both of this world, which is part of the grasping, and Hashem, which is part of the other world. I say other world, that other dimension of godliness. And therefore, he may have thought that he could. So the fact that he says it has meaning, because if I'm feeling all frustrated, how come I don't grasp Hashem? We can be somewhat assuaged by saying that even Eliyahu can't, but Eliyahu might have thought he could, because again, of his identity being the spectrum, that's my favorite word, that links the most personal with the most expressive. Now, hine, kol seichel kishemaskil umasik b'sichlo ezam muskal. So the Alter Rebbe, you see there's a period there, and that's intentional. He says, okay, let's put this to the side for a moment. Let's back up for a moment, and let's talk about how thoughts can grasp ideas. Can't grasp Hashem, but they can grasp other ideas. So the more we can break down what we are familiar with just intuitively, and we can start to get a little bit of a taste of what's going on here by understanding in general the process of how the intellect incorporates ideas. And again, this is the distinctive characteristic of being a human being. An animal, again, it sounds harsh, but I'm not. We have animating and characteristics that are similar, can be conditioned. You condition the animal, that if he goes on his hind legs and he puts out his paws, you throw him a cookie. That's not called intellectual grasping. And again, it sounds maybe a little harsh, but we do this with children as well. We tell them, kametz alafa, kametz alafa. What is this? Kametz alafa. You get a cookie. We have conditioned them. It's a form of learning. And again, I'm not berating it, but it's an elementary level. So you teach the child the conceptual, you teach the child the practical, and they move from there to the conceptual. Oh, yes, now I understand. 2 times 3, that means 3 2 times. 3 and 3 is 6. Oh, now I understand. Otherwise, you're just telling me 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 3 is 6. What's 2 times 3? 6. What's 3 times 2? How should I know? Because I didn't grasp the idea. I've only been conditioned. And again, I'm not disparaging it, but it's limited. And the kid who cries every time they don't get their way. Why? Because they've been conditioned. I don't get my way, I cry, I get my way. They're not being manipulative and so on. They don't know. This is how they've been conditioned. It's not something conscious. But we want to get beyond that because, again, that's training and conditioning. That's not what we would call genuine learning. So let's go through what genuine learning really looks like. Hine kol seichel, any seichel. And again, here we're not talking about pursuing Hashem. We're just talking about the functioning of seichel. Kishamaskil umasik besichloi, eza muskel. When he contemplates and he studies any idea. Any idea. Again, we're not talking here about Hashem. We're talking about learning a concept, math, whatever it is. Harei haseichel toifes es hamuskol umakifoi besichloi v'hamuskol nitvas umukef umalubish b'seich haseichel. This sounds almost, I know, a little bit like a tongue twister. You're just using these words, but we're going to break it down, and hopefully we're going to understand it. What happens? The seichel, which is my power of intelligence, seizes the idea. And again, the example that I like is computers, because I think we probably all remember when we didn't use computers, and it was some niche thing that people who read computer magazines studied and so on. And then we reluctantly took it into our life, and it was very clumsy and awkward. And we had to remember what seemed like totally random instructions and how to operate it until, hopefully, like anything, now we know how to do it. So that's how you learn how to drive. That's how you learn math. That's how you learn to read. That's how you learn how to type. That's how you learn to do dentistry, whatever it is. It's first, the concept is overwhelming and it consumes me. And then we start to make progress until we consume it. And now we speak that language. We can do that craft. We can operate that machinery. We can master this idea. But that's the key phrase where we become the master of the idea. Okay. So what happens? Again, we're breaking this down, and this is not distinctive to Torah or to Hashem. This is just our familiarity with how intellect works. The seichel, that is our power of intelligence, it contemplates and it grasps some idea. So at that moment, the seichel, my intelligence, grasps it. That's the key word. The key word is toifes. I totally master it. Like I know how to drive. I've mastered driving. I've mastered the language. I've mastered reading. It's something that is my tool. It's mine. I own it. I don't know if that's the right word. I can utilize it. It's completely a tool of mine. And the concept is completely and totally absorbed within my identity to the point that I can utilize it. So again, back to an overly simplistic idea, like math or reading. So again, an example, maybe this illustrates it a little better. Often you see a kid is in school and they're trying to read, and there's this struggle. That is, the concept of reading is the master of them because they are pursuing it. And they're pursuing it and they're pursuing, and then they can read. So now I'm the master of reading. But then they have to work on comprehension. So they read the whole paragraph. And then you say to them, what's the story about? Huh? Meaning I'm so fixated on on stringing the letter sounds together that I forgot to know what it means. And to take it, again, one step further in our community, where the kid is reading it in the Hebrew. So first they have to master the Hebrew reading. Then they have to master the translation. And then they read it, they translate it, and then you ask them, what was it about? And they don't necessarily know. And he said, El to. And then, Moshe, you say Moshe in English and in Hebrew. Moshe. I mean, it's just this like sort of rhythmic thing. And again, I'm not mocking it. It's the beginning. Then you master math or language or computers, and then not all of a sudden, but then you have the capacity to, I'll use this word, manipulate it or utilize it to be creative. So no longer are you the student of the idea, you become the master of math or language or driving or sewing or typing or dentistry or brain surgery or whatever it might be. You now have become the master. So You see where we're headed here, again, back of our mind. When we say no thought can grasp Hashem, that's the point. We are forever in pursuit of that infinity of Hashem. I mean, think about this at a human level. If you go to the doctor and they look at it, wow, I never saw this before, that's not inspiring confidence. But if they say, oh, yeah, I've seen this 1,000 times, well, what's that? You didn't even listen to me. Well, which one is it? I want him to be in pursuit of me, but not think that he has it. It's not toy-face. It's in pursuit. It's not toy-face. It's in pursuit. Now, with other forms of wisdom, you can have toy-face. You grasp it. With Hashem, no thought can grasp it. You cannot master it. Okay, we're heading there. We didn't get there. Okay. So here he gives us an example where you master it, you control it. Again, not to disregard. I can't change that 2 + 2 is 4. So it doesn't mean I'm the master of it as if I can change it. But now that I truly grasp it, I can work with it to develop engineering and all kinds of mathematical ideas. Again, it doesn't mean it's mine that I can change it, even with natural wisdom, secular wisdom, or even within Torah. So here he gives an example. Derech Mashal. For example, a person understands a certain halacha. They truly understand it. B'Mishnah or b'Gemara. It's in the Mishnah, it's in the Gemara. Lashur al-Burya. He totally masters it. He has it at every level. He's completely grasps it. Hooray, at that moment, we would say, sichla, his seichel, is, and here's the key word, toy-face. It's grasp this idea. Umakif, and it completely surrounds it, osa it. Gam sichla, and his seichel, malubash ba ba'osa is invested in it at that moment. Again, just like when I understand basic math, I say I mastered it. Doesn't mean I can change it. I can't change the 2 + 3 = 5 into 2 + 3 = 6. What I can do is understand that so intensely that I can utilize it and tease it out to fill out the concepts of engineering, etc. This halacha is chachmasoi. So now we take it back into how this furthers our relationship with Hashem. And herein lies a basic, essential perspective of Chassidus. What is the purpose of learning Torah? Now, the one purpose is, well, you got to know what to do. So that's the instructional side. I mean, how am I going to know how to keep kosher if I don't learn the laws of kosher? That's one application, one objective of Torah study. But what the Alter Rebbe has laid out for us here is that the purpose of Torah study is that Torah study is the mechanism through which we can align ourselves and know Hashem. When we talk about the Aseres HaDibros, which don't contain any data we were not already aware of, we say that the distinctive or the objective or the impact of the Ten Commandments is the experience that God invested himself so that we can be aligned with Hashem through the understanding of Torah and mitzvahs. In other words, you want to know who I am? Read my book. You read my book, you get to know me. You know, many people have probably played the game. You know, if you can meet anyone from history, who would you want to meet and what would you ask them? Well, in Torah study, we would argue that you meet these Torah people. You meet Hillel and Shammai and Moshe, because what we're interested in them is not how tall they were and if they had dark hair or light hair and blue eyes or brown eyes. We get to know them by that which they have invested within themselves. This is one of the reasons, just a little bit off topic, why we are so particular about the art which we allow ourselves to be exposed to. Because the art is an expression of the artist. And therefore, if the artist is a not healthy person, I want to be very cautious about whether I want their identity into my soul, which is accessed through their art. So it's an idea. So here the Alter Rebbe lays it out, and this is, again, one of those things that got the Alter Rebbe in trouble. And hopefully, as I say for every line, this is the whole message of Tanya. That this is God's will. That when Reuven makes a certain argument and he has a certain claim against his colleague Shimon, and Shimon responds with whatever he responds with, the rule should be whatever it should be. Now, that even though this will never happen, and I can tell you that in the Talmud, there are certain cases that are so far-fetched that you think, why do they even bother bringing this up? Now, if our whole purpose is to understand the functionality of this, then you're right. We don't have to bring this up. People say, oh, kids today, they don't know how to do long division because they have calculators and they have cell phones. Well, I don't know how to build a fire or trap a bear either. It's no longer necessary. It's not part of my life experience. So I don't have to do it. Again, whether the kids are going to learn, there's any value for kids learning long division or not is a separate discussion. So we have to come back to what is the objective of Torah study. Is the objective what to do if you put chicken soup in the cereal bowl? Or is the objective that this becomes an entry point into our alignment with Hashem? It's like different forms of discussion. We have discussions that are agenda planning. What are we having for dinner? What is the weather for tomorrow? And then we have the discussion that is, tell me about yourself. So we can describe, this is how tall I am and this is where I live, but what is the me? So here the Alter Rebbe is presenting to us that the goal of Torah study is the desire of Hashem for us to know him. The Torah study is the entry point into our relationship with Hashem. Now, as I've told you, this is what got the Alter Rebbe in trouble. People have been saying, what do you mean? The purpose of Torah study is for my scholarship. The purpose of Torah study is to know what to do. The purpose of Torah study is to create a cultural atmosphere. The purpose of Torah study is for me to pursue my understanding. And here the Alter Rebbe is saying this is God's will. Now, whether or not this ever happens, the fact that we understand that this is God's will gives us an understanding at some level of Hashem, but not to the point of Tfisa. That's the key. Now you start to see, oh, I thought, right, I'll get it so well, I got it. Well, you can't ever get it. You can't ever get it. You can't even ever get another person. So here the Alter Rebbe continues. Even if this will never happen. This will never happen. There is one case in the Torah, happens to be my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, which is probably a life lesson about the rebellious child who's so aggressively and violent and slovenly that he's put to death. So the Talmud debates whether this ever really happened. One opinion says yes, another opinion says no, this never happened. So what's the point? The point is learn it and you'll get the reward. Now, the common way this was understood is, you'll learn a life lesson. It doesn't have to be so egregious, but you tone it down, you see it as a metaphor, and so on and so forth. But here our point is it doesn't matter. It's like two friends saying, if you could fly to another planet, where would you go? If you won $100 million in the lottery, what would you do with it? If you could have a superpower, what would it be? Whatever it is, whatever the answer is, starts to give you insight in the person. I mean, the most egregious example I can think of is, if I won $100 million, I'd never talk to you again. Well, why are you insulted? I didn't win the $100 million. Because it's saying something about myself. Or the person, hopefully says something nicer. I can only think of the nasty thing. That is, this totally hypothetical, which nobody ever imagines would ever really happen, becomes an insight into the person. And that's what Hashem is telling us. The discussions and the analysis are not because we need to figure out what to do. That's true. That's this other aspect of Torah study. it is an opportunity for us to have an understanding of Hashem. It becomes an insight point. Nevertheless, since this is God's passion and wisdom, and you see the passion comes before the wisdom. Now, again, in English, when we say something is a passion, we tend to think of that as like a luxury item. But in Torah, when we use the word ratzon, we mean the deepest driving force behind our every activity. It's something far so deep, it's not even within our human locale. I mean, the intellect is in the head and behavior is in the hands, but ratzon is something that just drives everything about us. So it's not ratzon like I'd like to have a cookie or I'd like to have diamonds and something fancy. It is a ratzon, means that which drives me. That's why it's written here before the chacham. It is the driving force of Hashem. It is the wisdom of Hashem. That if this guy will argue this and this guy will argue that, this is what the rule is. Now, just a little note here, just to point out, you see, when the Alter Rebbe introduced this idea of the argument and the counter-argument, he used the phrase kach v'kach. He used it twice, kach v'kach. And here, where the Alter Rebbe is sort of summarizing it, he just uses the word kach once. Now, in our never-ending desire to overanalyze everything, this becomes another insight. Kach means like such. So kach v'kach, such and such. You know, it's like trials and tribulations, sick and tired. They just seem to sort of flow together. But the first time the Alter Rebbe says such and such, but now he says such. Because the such and such, we understand, means the concept and the implementation of that concept. The just one time such is just the concept, because we're not talking here about the implementation. Because it's not relevant whether this happened. It's not relevant. Why do I got to know this? Well, one day you won't have a calculator with you. Well, now I do. I always have it. Why do I need to know how to do square roots? So I don't know. But it's, again, Torah study, this perspective of Torah study is not about what do I do, again, under a certain circumstance. It is instead about the core message that this is important to Hashem. And the more I understand it, the more I become aligned with the infinity of Hashem. When a person understands this and he grasps psak zeh, this law, that is laid out clearly in the Mishnah or in the Gemara or in the later halachic codifiers, so I get it. I know what to do when I put the chicken soup in the cereal bowl. I know what to do exactly with how this mezuzah should be written or the matzah made, whatever it is. And I absolutely mastered it. At that moment, it's not just that I know it. In that moment, I am grasping Hashem himself. I know Hashem. I am aligned with Hashem. The less machshavet tfisabeh. That no thought can otherwise grasp him, not his will and not his wisdom. So I can't grasp the essence of Hashem. What can I grasp? What it is that is important to him, which becomes a portal to it. So we just had it in the Parsha. Hashem came to all the nations and he said, will you accept my Torah? And they all said, well, what does it say in your Torah? Which is not an unreasonable thing to ask. And Hashem told them the thing that he knew they weren't going to accept. So what are you playing games for? Why don't you tell them 610 things they'll like, and then they'll say, okay, if they get so many good things, I'll give up the one. Because they lost it at the moment that they asked, well, what does it say? Because then it's about whether I like it or not. And here, it's important to you, Hashem, therefore I'll learn Torah because it gets me to know you. That's what I want. I want to know you. And again, anybody who's ever had somebody want to know them, it could be very endearing or it could be very scary. I mean, are they trying to manipulate me? They want to get to know me because they want to sell me something that I don't want. So I'm protected. Well, Hashem does not protect himself. He just comes right down on Mount Sinai. Here I am. Here's my book. It's like they say, what's the secret to Chabad? There's no secret. You just give them the slightest indication that you're interested, and they'll show up at your house with mezuzahs and fill-in, and what's with the blowtorch? They can't wait. Hashem's like, here I am. There's no secrets. Here I am. And this is the distinctive factor about Torah study. Not because we like it better, because, look, we understand that a person can use Torah study because now I'm smarter than you, I got A's, I'm the hero, all kinds of things. Or it's curious, it's interesting, or beats breaking rocks for a living, and so on. What is it that is distinctive about Torah study? It is an opportunity for an alignment that is incomparable with anything else. Two people can work together on a project. They can be neighbors. They can be passengers on the same plane, and they feel a certain kinship to each other. And it's a kinship that can last long time. But there is nothing as absolutely unifying as truly understanding that person. So, when the performer says, I love you to his audience, we say, what do you love? You don't even know me. Well, right, meaning, excuse me, I feel a connection to you. We've all gathered together here. And therefore, there's a sense of connection. That's true. Again, simplest thing, analogy. You're on the plane with somebody, and then you see them the next day. Hey, weren't we on the plane with those people? Right, I have a certain, but it's not a unity. And then I forgot him. The absolute unity, incomparable to any other, is through knowing them, because it allows me to get outside of myself. When we work together on a project, I'm me and you're you. And even though we're both committed to it and we see the importance of it and we struggle and we high-five each other when it's done, I'm me and that person is that person. But when I know that person, it's the capacity to get outside of myself. And that's the difference between an animal and a person. And this is what is distinctive about Torah study. Now, again, this is what gets the Alter Rebbe in trouble, because out there in the world, there are people who don't see it that way. They don't see Torah study as being something that is about my unity with Hashem. They rather see it as my fulfillment of that mitzvah for my own understanding, my knowledge. I need to know how to do stuff. It's interesting, and so on. It's totally about a bittul. It's a total surrender. So whatever it is, I don't like that. I'm interested. I'm not interested. It doesn't matter. I mean, imagine, your friend comes and says, let me tell you about something that happened. I said, well, I don't care. Well, who cares? That's not interesting to me. Well, I'm not asking you to be interested in the subject matter. I'm asking you to be interested in me. And if you're interested in me, then you're interested in what I'm interested in, not because that's curious to you, but because that becomes an access point to my identity. And that's the distinctive characteristic of Torah study that's even greater than any other physical mitzvah. Now, it's a classic thing. What's the most important thing? Torah study. What's the most important thing? Mitzvah observance. What's the most important thing? Davening. What's the most important thing? Acts of kindness. Well, which one is it? It's like, which is your favorite grandchild? The one I'm with in the moment is my favorite. This is the one that I'm upset. What's the greatest day? Today. What about yesterday? Yesterday was great. Tomorrow will be great too. Today. So again, it's not a competition. It's explaining the distinctive characteristic of Torah study. Every mitzvah that's an action mitzvah or a spoken mitzvah, like saying the benching out loud or Lishma, which are mitzvahs in Torah. So Hashem is surrounding me in my physical speech or my action. When we know Torah, and again, it's not just because nobody knows more Torah than Google. Nobody has more data than the computer. So it's not because I've accumulated that information. As a wise man once said, AI knows more about my children than I do. It knows their birthdays and their shoe size and when their doctor's appointment is, but it doesn't know my children. It can recite more facts about my family than I could ever remember. It knows their social security card. It knows where they are at every moment, but it doesn't know them. So it's not just about data retention. It's about this infinite alignment with Hashem. Hinigam chochmas Hashem bekirba. Masha seichel masig betoifis umakit besichle. This wisdom of Hashem that is now incorporated within him, because this is the distinctive characteristic of intellect, that I can get outside of myself and import this idea. Each person according to their will, and this is what we referenced to before, that what is quote unquote bein hazmanim, what does it mean when you're on your own? It means now you're going to find the thing that your neshama is attracted to. Because as we talked about, everyone's neshama has a personality as well. So this neshama is more interested in the narrative. This one is more in the reference and the poetry and the Kabbalistic, whatever it might be. Lefi should be dias haTorah. HaTorah mulubeshes benefesh adam v'sichlei umukefes b'soicham. And since the understanding of Torah, the Torah becomes invested within the person, and his intellect becomes animated by it. He grasps it, so he sees everything through it, like learning how to read. I'm no longer sounding out the letters. I just see the word. I just see the word in the sentence. I see the word. I know what it means. I don't have to think, what does this word mean, and translate it in my head. That's why Torah study, in contrast to mitzvah observance, is called food. Not just because it nourishes, because it becomes ingested. Again, I know it's so obvious. I take the food, I put it in my mouth, it goes through it and my stomach. So my stomach hurts. Why am I putting something in my mouth? Well, of course, because we understand that the two are linked. So too, when we absorb something intellectually, it animates everything about us. Ki kamoisha lechem hagashmi zon es haguf kishmachniso b'soiche v'kirbei mamish, just like bread, literally, satiates the body when you absorb it. The nahapik sham lios damo bas kibsarais, unlike the garment. But when I wear it, it's still the same jacket, and when I take it off, it's the same jacket. But again, I mean, just to follow the basic idea, not here to study the biology of digestion. When I take food and I absorb it in my mouth, it's not an apple in my stomach. It literally becomes one with my being. Unlike the physical garment, which is not changed to my identity. So too, when I fulfill this objective of studying Torah, again, not just because I want to add data to my identity, that now I know the names of all 50 state capitals, or now I know all the names of the Nevi'im, but it's still a concept that is added on to my identity. When it's driven by my desire to get to know Hashem, I have now been transformed. I have now been changed to be in total alignment with my identity. So now this is what's happened. Hashem has invested himself in Torah, and when I ingest that Torah, I am ingesting the infinity of Hashem. This is why I can only become aligned through the Torah that Hashem offers us. Meaning, I can only know what Hashem makes me know about him. Whereas when I decide that this is what I want Hashem to want, no different than when I decide this is what I want the other person to want. And again, if you've ever had that experience with someone who genuinely wants to get to know you, they are very humbled to it. There's a man, his name is Ari Goldman. He's a professor, but he used to be a reporter for the New York Times, back when that was significant. And he's a frum man, and he had a few opportunities where he spoke with the Rebbe. You could see it on video. And he described, what was unique about his experience with the Rebbe. He says, I've interviewed many famous people and so on. Some are generous with their time, some are not so generous with their time. But you never get the feeling that they are all that interested in you. They're there to tell you what they think and their experiences and so on. The Rebbe, he came into the Rebbe starts asking me, who are you? Where are you from? Who is your family? What's your life history? So I asked the questions here. Meaning, this was that idea. to truly want to know somebody. Do we do that? Do we say to the doctor, how are you feeling today? Do we ask the other person, how are you doing? Am I true, or do I only see them as they serve me? So here, in this idea, when we are learning Torah, it's because we're wanting to know Hashem. This is what we want to know. How can we know Hashem? We can't understand infinity and so on. Why know Hashem? Because intellect is our distinctive human capacity to get over ourselves, to get outside of ourselves, and go and grasp something from the outside and incorporate it within us to the point that it changes everything about us. That's the objective of Torah study. Yes, it's good that it's interesting and it's important that it's pragmatic and we have to know what to do. Yes, 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 all of it. And this is why there's so much emphasis on Torah study. So the Alter Rebbe continues, that the garments are the mitzvahs, but a garment is not changed by my putting it on, unless it's too small and I rip it. It's not changed by my wearing it. And I'm not changed by wearing it. In the moment I am, if I'm outside and it's cold, I put on the garment, I'm warm. I take it off, I'm still cold. What happened? I was wearing the garment, right? I was. Now it's off. It's separable from me. But Torah is like nourishment. It is absorbed within my very identity. Now here's really the key phrase. When we are engaged in Torah for its sake, lishma. Now this is a very difficult word to translate. It's much easier to translate the opposite. The opposite is I want to get an A on my test. The opposite is I want to write a book. Those are all very egregious forms of not lishma. Not lishma is somehow it makes me socially advanced, popular, powerful, enriched, etc. That is one form of shalei lishma. But here the Alter Rebbe is saying, even if it is that I want to know how to keep Torah, it may also be shalei lishma. Because what we're looking for is that it is in the desire to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem. That's what we want it to be. Why do I learn Torah? Because God is important to me. That's why. Because God is important to me. And I want to know Hashem. I want to be aligned with Hashem. And this is the portal of entry to that form of alignment. And that's why it has to be lishma. Again, to use a very overly simplistic example, if the doctor asks me how I'm doing, it's because he wants to help me, we hope. If the salesman asks me about my life, he may be wanting, again, I want to disparage all salesmen, but he may be looking for an angle that he can manipulate me to buying something that he wants to sell me. It's not about him. It's not about me. It's about him. He's not thinking about me because he wants to know me. He's thinking about what can he get from me? And again, hopefully we've had the positive experience. We've probably also had the negative experience. Like it says in the Zohar. And what is this thing, lishma? What does it mean, lishma? Hainu kidei lekasher nafshe laHashem, aidei hasagas sateri ish kifi sichlik mashkas priyetz chaim. It is because I want to connect myself with Hashem. Now, even that you could argue was a little bit selfish. I want to be connected with Hashem. Yeah, but this is the Beinoni we're talking about. This is the aspiration of the Beinoni. He's not total bittul, but it's I want to be close with Hashem. I want to do that, because I want to be close with Hashem.
You're talking around lishma, you're not defining it, or did I miss something?
No, because it's a very difficult word to define, specifically because it doesn't really exist in a secular context. It is the desire simply for Hashem. There's nothing, not because I want to get something from it, not because it's going to even make my life, quote unquote, better in the self-serving sense. I simply want to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem. That's what I want. I want to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem. That's lishma. It's not because I need to know what to do, how to do, and so on. Now, again, the most egregious forms are, well, I want to get an A on the test, and then everyone will like me. Or it could be, I don't know, it's like a kid. Why do you go to school? I don't know. That's what you're supposed to do. I don't think about it. So lishma means that it is, my desire is to be connected with Hashem. How am I connected with Hashem? Again, you think about, what does Hashem want from me on Yom Kippur is different than what he wants from me on Sukkot. Well, what if I say, well, I really feel close to Hashem when I fast on Yom Kippur. So I'm going to fast on Sukkot, but that's not what Hashem wants. So we say, well, if that's what he wants, this is what I want. Well, if it's about what I want, do whatever you want. If it's about what Hashem wants, then I have to do it the way Hashem wants it done. Well, this is part of the concept when it comes to this idea of Lishma. I'm doing it because I want to be aligned with Hashem. It's important to Hashem, therefore it's important to me. And if in 5 minutes it won't be important to Hashem, it won't. And here the Alter Rebbe again summarizes this idea. When we refer to Torah as nourishment, it's because it's internalized. It literally penetrates my identity. It's not an apple in my stomach. It becomes one with me. And the mitzvahs are garments. It's the coat I'm wearing, but it's a coat, and I'm me, and I'm wearing the coat. The coat is still the coat. And that's why we put so much emphasis on Torah study. And again, this really not a way to win friends and influence people. People were saying, what do you mean? The scholarship, this is the highest aspiration. This is why mitzvahs, and this is why Torah study is the equivalent of all mitzvahs. Because mitzvahs, again, are still garments. It's not unimportant, right? Nobody doesn't want to have garments. But Torah he mustn't, and Torah is actual nourishment. It becomes one with you, like the food becomes one with you. And it also serves, because there's also a mitzvah of Torah study, it also serves as a garment for my capacity for intellect. I have now invested my intelligence in the garment of Torah study rather than in history or science and so on. That I have now become so invested in it that my thoughts are driven by it. Again, just like, unfortunately, it's easier to describe if I eat bad food, everything about me feels sick. When I eat healthy food, everything about me hopefully feels healthy. When I absorb Torah, I start to see the world through a visual of Torah. And so much so when I verbalize it, because now I've brought it from the conceptual to the actual. And those words now start to become the character, I like the word, the culture of my identity, as is written in the Pri Etz Chaim.